Okay, so today is the session number 6 of semester 1 on lattice, Frobenius algebra lattice in tensor category. So remember yesterday we finished by providing a way to make a Frobenius algebra from any object, in fact, in a monoidal category. So this is very general. You take any monoidal category, you take any object having a left dual and a double dual, you just assume that its double dual is equal to itself, but this is a very weak assumption. You can get that very easily. And then this object has a structure of Frobenius algebra. So this is, in some sense, the fundamental example of Frobenius algebra. So this is, in fact, in some previous class, we already see that this object has a structure of algebra using that, which generalize, in fact, this is a generalization of something I did not say yesterday, of the matrix algebra, because the matrix algebra is nothing but something like that, and C over N is its own dual. When you write something like that, end of V, end of V, this is isomorphic to V tensor V star, end of V. So here you have an object very general, but in fact this object, this Frobenius algebra is the monoidal category generalization of the matrix algebra. So this is a fundamental notion. And in fact, the proof that it is a Frobenius algebra is very pictorial, as we say yesterday. So you define multiplication, commultiplication, unit, co-unit by this picture, and you just check the assumption of a Frobenius algebra, so associativity, unit, unitality, and Frobenius condition, and similarly for co-associativity. And you see, this is crystal clear, this is very clear, that it's a Frobenius algebra, it's immediate. Okay. And in fact, it is connected. More than that, it's a connected Frobenius algebra. Okay. So as I said yesterday, the next proposition, so this proposition is just a baby example of a very deep result due to Muger, which we will not prove in this paper. In fact, in this class, maybe it should be an entire class to cover the paper of Muger, maybe several semesters. But the idea is very similar, and the result of Muger is saying that under some very general assumption, every Frobenius algebra is of this form, but you have to replace monoidal category by some two category. So you have a monoidal category is like one category, but you need two category. And if you go to you do this step, every Frobenius algebra is of this form. So this is very. So I will state this result, but we will not really use it. So even if you are not comfortable with the notion of two category, in fact, you don't need to care much about that. We will. I will not define that in details. It's just we will use this proposition. Yeah. At some moment we may use this proposition, but it will be just something a side remark or some way to it will. Yeah. So understanding of the proposition is not required. So let me state this proposition due to Muger. So consider the two categories. So don't worry if you don't know what is the two categories. What is it? This is A or
U.
U? or we call it like that, U. With two objects. So the idea of a two category, you have one category, you have object and morphism. In the two category, you have object and morphism between the morphism, if you like. And the three category, etc. You can continue morphism between the morphism, etc., etc. With two objects, so here you have only two objects. Two objects denoted as C and D. So which means that we denote like that. In fact, the object is just the zero cell, if you like, of the two categories, just C and D. Okay. Then define the monoidal category C and D. So this is curve. So I should be careful here. It's straight C and D, and then we will consider curved C and D. Define the monoidal category C and D, curved C and D, as a monoidal category. So again, if you are not comfortable with what I am saying, don't worry. The class will not be about that, but it's good to mention that. What is good to know is to have this baby example in mind. You know what we in the two categories, this will work. The idea will be the same. So as long as you have this in mind, you have the good intuition, and then the rest is just a question of being comfortable with the notion of two categories. But it's not the point of this class. So as monoidal category, U and U, C and U, D. So the object, the monoidal category are really the endomorphism, the end. So the if you like the home between C and C in these two categories. So this has a structure of monoidal category where the tensor structure is given by the composition of the morphism here. So F tensor G is just F composed of G, something like that. So we have these two categories, this monoidal category C and D. So define like that respectively. Okay. Okay, now let M represent the CD, so curve. So don't worry, it's a little bit involved, but it's bimodule category. So that many notions I am writing in this proposition may require some detailed definition. For example, what is the definition of a bimodule category, etc. What is the definition of two category? We will not go into this detail because, let me repeat again, that we will not need that. So don't worry. So let M represent the CD bimodule category, specifically home U C D. So this is M is exactly that. M is that. This is M. M is between the object C and D in the category U, and it's a CD bimodule category. This is not curved, but it's confusing. Okay. Now suppose we want an object. We want to apply the dual and make the tensor product to produce a Frobenius algebra. Suppose Y is a simple object in M. So this let me think that we did not assume Y to be simple here. We don't need Y to be simple in here. It should not be simple in the baby example.
If connected, you can
Hmm?
if you need X to be connected.
Linear simple.
Linear simple.
Okay. But in this proposition, we assume Y to be simple directly. So suppose Y is a simple object in M, and let Y to call that hat Y. The hat, no, it's a
Hat or cap, Y cap.
Y
Cap.
wedge, no wedge.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Is it cap or yeah, wedge? Y.
Wedge. So in here. So this is a big difference with the baby example we showed before. So we are in two categories. In fact, the dual with Y power cap like that is not in the same category. It is in the DC bimodule category, between D and C. So you change the category. Okay, they are not in monoidal category, they are in bimodule category. But of course, the previous example can be stated this way, where you take everything to be, you take C equal D, and you take M to be the modular category you want, etc., etc. So what I mean is this proposition, the statement of this proposition can collapse, can degenerate in some sense with the previous case. So you have that, okay. So it's a two-sided dual, B, two-sided dual of Y. Again, I don't define that. Then the object X to be Y composed with. So here the tensor is the composition. The Y wedge. So you go from D to C and then to C to D. So it makes sense to make a composition in C. So it's from D to D. So wait. So it's not in C. It's in D. Is it in D or in C?
Either in C or in D.
Because
D to C here, D.
It's in D. It's a typo. Or I can revert, I can say Y hat composed with Y. Here we said, we wrote, so it should be in D. Position 2, 5, C should be E. Yeah, because you have, or maybe we can change. So this from D to C, and then you apply this from C to D. So it's from D to D. So it's there. So it's really D. Anyway, does not matter. Can be. So this object in D, in the monoidal category D, can be structured as a connected Frobenius algebra. Okay. So then we have another typo here. Because we said can be structured as a connected Frobenius algebra. And then moreover, if U is k-linear and Y linear simple, then X is connected. But we already said it's connected. So maybe we need to remove connected. Can be structured as a Frobenius algebra.
Oh.
But then do we need to assume Y to be simple? I'm not sure. Maybe this is how Muger stated that. So can be structured as a connected. We don't need that. Can be structured as a Frobenius algebra. Moreover, if U is k-linear and Y is linear simple, then X is connected. So for the details regarding that, you should go to lemma. So I guess this is that lemma 3.4 in Muger. Right. It should be more than the lemma. So this is okay. So okay, we can generalize. So this proposition is saying that you can generalize the previous construction to two categories and make some more general Frobenius algebra, but the very important point is that the reverse hold, the converse is true, and that make this result completely fundamental. This is really the big success, big result of Muger. It's worth noting that the converse of previous proposition also hold. So every Frobenius algebra is of this form. If you have a Frobenius algebra, there exist two categories such that it is of this form. So this is fundamental, as shown in the Muger proposition 3.8. Okay. So this is very important. So let me write very important. That's why I wrote, even if we not really use this kind of thing, this is really important. Okay. So I wonder whether we really need Y to be simple here, because we said linear simple. So maybe it is stated Y is simple. It is stated like that in Muger, I don't remember. Anyway, does not matter. What we will interested in is one example, the main example of this kind of construction is subfactor theorem. Example 227, also provided in Muger. There are plenty of examples of this kind of construction coming from sub-factor theory. So again, for people who don't know what is sub-factor, this class is not a course on sub-factor. So if you are interested in what is a sub-factor, you should go to the book called Introduction to Sub-factor Theory by Vaughan Jones and Sunder. A very nice little book. It's a good introduction to sub-factor theory. So let M in M be a finite index inclusion of 2 n factor. The goal of this class is to take result from sub-factor theory called Watatanis finiteness theorem, to reformulate it in the language of unitary tensor category, and to relax as much as possible the unitary assumption and the tensor assumption. So everything will be defined in this setting of tensor category. That's why you don't really need, to understand the class, you don't really need to know what is a sub-factor. But it's good for your own culture to know that there is this kind of object coming from functional analysis and operator algebra, from which you can make most of the example of Frobenius algebra, of connected Frobenius algebra. Because before that, the Frobenius algebra, which was already known, was in VEC, but in VEC, as I said in the slide, the category VEC is blind to connectedness. So to get very interesting example in the connected case, irreducible sub-factor theory is really the good place to go. So then, you have an inclusion of factor. So factor is building blocks of von Neumann algebra, and so it's infinite dimensional algebra. But there are finite index in the sense that even if n and m are infinite dimensional, the dimension of m with respect to n is finite. So then X to be the nn bimodule. You consider M as the nn bimodule. So M is an algebra, so you can multiply on the left and the right. So N is a subalgebra, so it makes sense. When you multiply by an element of N, multiply an element of M by an element of N, on the left or on the right, it's still in M. So you can see M as a nn bimodule. So this is the Frobenius algebra. So there is a structure of Frobenius algebra in the tensor category. In fact, unitary tensor category, C of nn bimodule. So this follow. And in fact, this Frobenius algebra, what I will write, the structure of Frobenius algebra follow from the general theorem we mentioned before. It's not a surprise because we said in the remark that every Frobenius algebra is of this form. So it's not a surprise. To prove that it's a Frobenius algebra, we will just write this way. So this follow the structure outlined in previous proposition, where D, so maybe I have to be careful which one I say it's D, which one I say it's C, because we replace C by D. Doesn't matter. So let's see. in example 227. Where D is the tensor category. Category of MM by module. Okay. Y is, you see M as a N M by module. Here is this is a, because you have NN by module, MM by module, NM or MN, you can make a two category this way with two objects, in fact. MM by module, Y is M as a NM by module, Y hat is M as a MN by module, such that X is equal to Y tensor with respect to M, Y hat. So X as a NN by module is equal to the tensor of Y and Y hat in this two category setting. And so it's automatically a Frobenius algebra, according to Mugger theorem proposition before. Moreover, the subfactor n included in M is irreducible, which means the relative commutant, so the element in M commuting with N, they are just the constant multiple of identity. If and only if the Frobenius algebra is connected. The Frobenius algebra X is connected. So what I omitted to say is that, in fact, C is a unitary tensor category. So everything is unitary. But most of the example we know, most of the example of Frobenius algebra we know, most of the example of connected Frobenius algebra we know, are of this form. They are a unitary structure. So they are it's very rare because we, in fact, there are most of the example coming from, I don't know, from quantum group, etc. Yeah, most of them that admit a unitary structure and so can be written of this form and so come from subfactor. Anyway. So this is really fundamental. It's more than an example. In fact, it's a pattern of most of the examples which are known. Even if we know that there exists fusion category which are not Grothendieck equivalent to unitary fusion category. In fact, which are not Grothendieck equivalent to pseudo-unitary fusion category. This is an example I already mentioned several times due to Andrew Shapiro. So in this kind of category, which are very rare, if you consider a Frobenius algebra, which is not Morita equivalent to something trivial, then you may have something which cannot be represented by a subfactor. But it's not clear. In fact, we discussed with Andrew Shapiro, it's not clear that his category admits a non-trivial Frobenius algebra. By non-trivial, we mean which are not Morita equivalent to the trivial. So, anyway. So, now what about the next remark? So, the next remark is a kind of review of the literature regarding this kind of result. So how to prove, what is the proof Yeah, so the next remark is about connection between unitary tensor unitary Frobenius algebra and unitary tensor category and finite index of factor. So this correspondence is not clearly written or explicitly written in the literature. You have to pick some result somewhere, some other result somewhere, etc., to combine together and to see that you really have this correspondence, but it's not explicitly stated. So this is what we try to explain in this remark. So this remark will provide several references explaining the correspondence between unitary Frobenius algebra and unitary tensor category and infinite index of factor. As I said in the first slide in the introduction part, a finite index of factor is a unitary Frobenius algebra in a unitary tensor category. This is more or less the same data, the same notion. What we need to be careful from the analytical aspect is that you may have some finite index of factor with some extra analytical data inside due to the fact that it may be of infinite depth. So it's not true that every finite index of factor can be completely presented in terms of category theory. But if it is finite depth, or more generally, if it is amenable, then these two notions are really the same. There is no analytical data in the subfactor, it's purely categorical data. Okay, so I'm just repeating what I said in the first slide of the introduction part. So let me write this reference. It is a well-known fact that every so you can say folklore, but well-known fact, every unitary Frobenius algebra. So I did not yet define what is unitary. We will define that later. Every unitary Frobenius algebra. You should see this last proposition and remark more like as a motivation. Because as I said, what we want to prove in this class is something categorical. So this kind of motivation are very useful for motivation, but not for the details of what we will do in this class. So every unitary Frobenius algebra in a unitary tensor category can be realized in the form presented in the previous example. 227. So here is a sketch of one possible argument. Here is a sketch of one possible argument. So you start with a unitary Frobenius algebra in a unitary tensor category. Starting with a unitary Frobenius algebra. So don't worry, we will define that later. Starting with a unitary Frobenius algebra in a unitary tensor category. Okay. One first invoke the construction in the Muger paper, the construction in Muger. So, see remark 226. So Muger said every Frobenius algebra is of the form written in this proposition. Okay. So you start from a Frobenius algebra. We know by Muger is of this form. Okay. To obtain two categories as described in proposition 225. So this is commonly known as the Morita context. This is the name Muger gives to that. Morita context. So now we will use a result in the paper of Shamindra Ghosh. So là, Beregi, the result of Shamindra Ghosh, so SK, which is a PhD advisor of the co-author of the paper we are covering. Same family name, but they are not in the same family. So this paper in GFA, GA, Journal of Algebra, 2011. Journal of Algebra, 2011. So it's not in GFA. I thought it was in GFA.
The Korean Shamindra Ghosh, that paper is in GFA.
Okay. So the result, along with unitarity. So what was this paper? The name of the paper is Planar Algebra, a categorical theoretic point of view. So they are saying that you take a two categories. The point is that you take a unitary two category, and from that you make a subfactor planar algebra. This is the idea. And from a subfactor planar algebra, you make a subfactor by Popa and Vaughan and Popa-Jones reconstruction. So this is what I will write. So along with unitarity, this structure gives rise to a subfactor planar algebra. Give rise to a subfactor planar algebra. So the notion of subfactor planar algebra is really the bridge between tensor category and subfactor theory, the bridge between category and functional analysis. You will have this notion of planar algebra due to Vaughan-Jones, and it's really the bridge. Finally, the Popa-Jones reconstruction theorem. So we cite 30. What is 30? So we cite the paper of C. Vaughan-Jones. Jones. Paper published after its death. Published something like 20 years after he was written. After his death. So Planar Algebra 1. Planar Algebra 1.
2021. It was published in 2021, I think.
Yeah, 2021. But it was on archive in 1999, so yeah, 22 years It's a a long review. So in this paper, we cover. So you start. So this Frobenius planar algebra is more. So it's a bridge between category and analysis. And from a subfactor planar algebra, you can really make a true subfactor, so a true object in operator algebra. Then is the Popa-Jones reconstruction theorem mentioned in this planar algebra 1 due to Jones. We recover the desired realization. In the irreducible case, this result trace back to I guess Longo. So Longo proved something like that long ago before in 94. So Longo in 1994. So a paper published in Communication and Mathematical Physics. And you can see also more recent development. See also the more recent. So of course the details reference are written in the paper we are covering. The paper is on the archive. And I guess the link is written in the reference of the class. So two recent developments. So by Corey Jones, Dave Pennis. Yeah, Jones and Pennis. In Corey Jones, Dave Pennis. And I cited two papers. So in 197 in advancing in communication mathematical physics and one in 2019 in advancing math. So the first is called operator algebra in rigid C-star tensor category, and the other is called realization of algebra object and discrete subfactors. So go to the reference of the paper we are covering. Okay. So let me write the last sentence before the pause. When I write that the notion of unitarity will be reviewed in some next section. The notion of unitary is reviewed in remark 6.5 and definition 4.23. So if you cannot wait, you can go to the paper and go to this section now. Otherwise, we will see that later. Okay, so pause. After the pause, we will start section 3. About Frobenius subalgebra. Okay. So now let's start new section called Frobenius subalgebra. So the topic of the class is Frobenius subalgebra lattice in tensor category. So the main ingredient is Frobenius subalgebra. So what we did in the first part of the class today was just some sense motivation, historical, reference. Yeah, Muger, Vaughan Jones, etc. How motivation, initial motivation coming from sub-factor theory, etc. So we explain the explicit link between sub-factor and Frobenius algebra. So it was a little bit difficult to follow for people who are not comfortable with that. But as I said, it is not the point of this class. So now we are very motivated. So now let's come back to let's come back to the basics. So now what I will write from now in this section will be much easier to understand than what I said previously today. So we come back to the basics in a general monoidal category. So example, okay. Okay, so example. So in the example 227 with subfactor, what this example is saying? This example shows the sense in which the theorem, the main theorem we will prove, so the generalization of Watatani's finiteness theorem, in what sense it extends Watatani's finiteness theorem? Watatani's theorem from subfactor theory. Because this example permits to reformulate Watatani's finiteness theorem in the setting of a tensor category. And so, as I said, unitary tensor category, and as I said, the goal of the class is to relax as much as possible the unitary and the tensor assumption. So this is the best result, the best theorem. We will state later that it is one of the theorem we stated in the slides. One of them. So this show in what sense this really extends Watatani's theorem. Remember, Watatani's theorem is about finiteness of the number of intermediate subfactors. So now we know what is the analog. We need to know the analog of intermediate subfactor in the setting of Frobenius algebra in tensor category. So to generalize the concept of intermediate subfactor, it is essential to clarify what we mean by Frobenius subalgebra. Clarify what we mean by Frobenius subalgebra. So, as I already said during the slide introduction part, the naive way to do that is to say that you consider, you take a Frobenius algebra, and what should be a Frobenius what is a false naive way to define a Frobenius subalgebra? And you take two Frobenius algebra, you take a monomorphism between the two, and you assume this monomorphism is a Frobenius algebra monomorphism. But that does not work because any Frobenius algebra morphism is an isomorphism. So according to that, any Frobenius subalgebra will be equal, will be an isomorphic. So it's not working. So we need to relax the Frobenius algebra morphism assumption. But let's first explain why a morphism of Frobenius algebra is always an isomorphism. Definition. Wait. No. Let me write the sentence. Frobenius algebra. First, let us recall why the morphism of Frobenius algebra is an isomorphism. So definition. What is a morphism of Frobenius algebra? The Frobenius algebra morphism. Okay. So, the morphism F between Frobenius algebra X, M, delta, E, epsilon, and X prime, M prime, delta prime, E prime, epsilon prime, in a monoidal category. Category C is called the Frobenius algebra morphism if it satisfies the following condition. If it satisfies the following conditions. And again, we will have to check there is no typo here. So, unital algebra morphism. Unital algebra morphism which is so F from X to X prime. So the unit of X prime is F composed with the unit of X. So this is for unital. And the multiplication morphism for X prime composed with F tensor F is F composed with the multiplication of X. And it's also a co-unital coalgebra morphism. Co-unital coalgebra morphism. So we will write picture for that and then we will check whether there is no typo. So epsilon, the co-unit of X is a co-unit of X prime composed with F, and F tensor F composed with the multiplication of X is the multiplication of X prime composed with F. Okay. So this condition can be depicted as follows. These conditions can be illustrated as follow. So unital morphism. So I rewrite 4 picture. Unital morphism. So the unit of X prime is the unit of F composed, the unit of X composed with F. Okay. So f is really from x to x prime, so this is okay. This is what we call unital morphism. So this means that f is a unital morphism. Then algebra morphism. Okay, so you take the multiplication on x prime, and then you put here f. So now you are in x, and that should be the multiplication on x composed with f here. So what this is saying, so this is called algebra morphism. This is just saying that here you can just put f out, you move up to out, and you get that. And what is here is saying that you can, here f you can split when you cross this this thing, you split the f. So f can be split with respect to the multiplication morphism. Exactly what this is saying. So let me check there is no typo in the formula. So really E, F, E prime, okay. And here M composed with F tensor F, M prime, okay. That's okay. And now the picture. So the picture for the co-unital morphism and co-algebra morphism, you just take the mirror image of that, like that, etc., etc. I will write, but you just take the mirror image and you get what you want. So mirror image, but be careful, you have to replace x by x prime. X, the co-unit of x is like that. And here is x prime. So similarly, you can put the f out. Co-unital morphism. So let me repeat. It is not exactly the mirror image. You also have to permute x and x prime. You see here, if you just take the mirror image, you will get x prime here, but you permute x and x prime. So you replace x prime by x. And here, mirror image, replace x by x, etc. And similarly, here, so use the f split. So if you have f from x to x prime, and then the co-multiplication of x prime, you can split here x prime, x prime. Okay, and this is called the coalgebra morphism. And let me check the formula. So the first f composed with oh yeah, okay, the second f x prime, delta prime, delta, okay. The formula is okay, no typo here. Okay. So first lemma. So we decompose the notion of Frobenius algebra morphism into 4 parts, but we will use these 4 parts independently in the rest of the class. When we want to talk about algebra morphism independently of any Frobenius algebra morphism, we just pick this. If you just want to know unital morphism, you pick this, etc. So lemma 3.2. Okay. So what this lemma is saying? So you take a unital algebra in a monoidal category, and you take a triple. So you take a unital algebra XME. So okay, and you take a triple X prime M prime E along with a monomorphism from X prime to X that satisfies the condition of a unital algebra morphism as before. Then X prime M prime E is also a unital algebra. So you take XME to be a unital algebra in a monoidal category, and then you take some abstract triple X prime M prime E, where M prime and E prime are just abstract morphism, and you assume they satisfy the condition of a unital algebra morphism between X and X prime and X. And then the unital algebra morphism permit to push the unital algebra structure to X prime. Exactly what this lemma is saying. So let XME be a unital algebra in a monoidal category. If X prime, M prime, E prime is a triple along with a monomorphism, so along with a monomorphism F from X to X prime to X, that satisfies the condition of a unital algebra morphism from definition 3.1. Then X prime, M prime, E prime is also a unital algebra. Okay, so this lemma may be a little confusing because in the definition mentioned, you start from two Frobenius algebra. If you prefer, in the setting of this lemma, you say we start from two unital algebra. So we can say what are we? There is nothing to prove because following the setting of this definition, X prime, M prime, E prime is already a unital algebra. So you need to clarify. You take a triple, a random triple. So M prime, so X prime is an object. M prime is a morphism from X tensor X, M prime tensor X prime to X prime. Some morphism. We don't specify any axiom for that. And E prime is something like that. So you just take one morphism. So it means that M, you are just saying that you are just nothing but M prime is in OM C of X prime tensor X prime to X prime, and E prime is in OM C of 1 X prime. You don't say anything else. And you pick you take a morphism, a monomorphism between X prime and X, and you want it to, you make it satisfy these two properties. So this makes sense. This equality makes sense even if X prime is not a unital algebra. You just say it's an object, and you want this to be satisfied. You want F to be a monomorphism, and you assume X to be a unital algebra, and the lemma is saying that you deduce from this equality that X is in fact a unital algebra. So it's okay. So the way the lemma is written is a little confusing, but this is what I explained. Okay. So maybe yeah, I should say lemma 3 to M prime in something, E prime in maybe. Okay. And the proof is as follow. It's pictorial again. To prove unitality, we begin with the following illustration, following picture. With the following illustration. Okay, so we want to prove unitality for X prime. So what we want is to show that this is equal to this for X prime. This is what we want to show. Okay, so we start from that, but we put the morphism F from X prime to X. Okay, we know that by assumption, this satisfies, you can split the F. So we cannot say it's an algebra morphism because we don't know yet X prime is an algebra. What you can say is that you can split the F by assumption. This is what we... So we write algebra morphism because algebra morphism is just splitting the F. Okay. So we write algebra morphism even if it is a little abuse of notation because X prime is not yet proved to be an algebra object, but let me repeat again that we just need the assumption that you can split the F algebra morphism. So it's a little abuse of notation, but I hope you understood that there is no problem here. So you split the F. Okay, now you are there. And now you use the unital morphism. Again, same remark. You just use the fact that you can put the F out by assumption. So unital morphism. This is equal to that. Okay, but what do you observe now? You observe that you are in X. So now you apply the unitality for X. So unitality for X. So let me write maybe like that. Unitality for X, which is known by assumption. X is unital algebra. And you get that. Okay. And similarly, so you can go the other way if you like. You start by putting the dot here instead of here, and you make the same argument. And so this is equal to something like that. So this is only the first step in the proof. Okay, so we know that. That's okay. And now we use the assumption we did not use yet, the fact that F is a monomorphism. What is monomorphism? Monomorphism just means left cancellative by definition. Since the morphism F is left cancellative, which is a definition of monomorphism. So this is a very general definition of monomorphism, which generalizes the notion of inclusion of set, of embedding of set. The more general way to generalize that is by the notion of monomorphism, which defined as left cancellative. Is a monomorphism, definition of a monomorphism. And what left cancellative mean? It means that you can, when you have an equality, this equal this, this is on the bottom, so it means it's on the left when you write algebraically. So you can delete. So this means this equal this. This is left cancellative. So which means that if you have G, so F, sorry. So let me write maybe the definition here. Left cancellative. F compose G equal F compose G prime imply G equal G prime. So you apply this here, as I said, this definition of monomorphism, and you deduce that this equal this. And so you get the unitality for X prime. Okay, the result follow. So very important. This notion of, you have the same for epimorphism, which is right cancellative, and this will be the point of the next lemma. So the result follow. The result follow. And the proof for associativity, so you need also algebra morphism, which means we need to check the associativity. Yeah. We need to check the associativity. It's an algebra, so we need to check associativity, and you deduce the associativity similarly. You start from that, you put an F, etc. And you split, you make some manipulation, etc. And at the end, you get something like that. Tac, tac, with some F equal tac, with some F. And then it's left cancellative. So you get really so this is very similar. So the proof for associativity is analogous. Okay. Okay, so now you have the dual lemma for co-unital coalgebra, and we will just state, and the proof will be as for the previous lemma where you replace monomorphism by epimorphism. So epimorphism means right cancellative. And remember that when you consider co-unital coalgebra, this is the symmetric. You just take the symmetric of that, the reflection here. So the F will be on the top now. Being on the top means, when you write algebraically, mean will be on the right. And yes, on the right, on the left. Wait, if it is on the top, it is on the right, on the left. Wait, on the right, yeah. on the right. So you need right cancellative, which is a definition of epimorphism, which is the generalization of the notion of what surjective, injective, surjective. So monomorphism generalize the notion of injective, of inclusion, of embedding, and right cancellative generalize the notion of surjective, of projection, of something like that. So really similarly, so lemma 3.3 let x delta epsilon be a co-unital, or maybe I can copy and paste to be, because this is really similar. Can I copy paste without losing more time? Oh, it's okay, let me write it. Let x delta epsilon be a co-unital coalgebra in a monoidal category if x prime delta prime epsilon prime is a triple along with an epimorphism f from x to x prime that satisfies the condition of co-unital co-algebra morphism. So same remark, x prime is not a co-unital coalgebra, but it makes sense to consider f as satisfying the condition because it's just a question of splitting or something like that. Coalgebra morphism from definition 3.1, then x prime delta prime epsilon prime is also a co-unital coalgebra. And the proof is similar because epimorphism is defined as right cancellative. The proof is similar to that of lemma 3.2 as an epimorphism is defined to be right cancellative. Double L. Okay. Okay. So now we have all the ingredients to prove that the Frobenius algebra morphism is an isomorphism. Again, this is the proof is straightforward for those who know the proof, but it's a good exercise to. It may not be straightforward if you are not comfortable with that. So this is a kind of good exercise which permits to make you more comfortable with this kind of notion. May permit you to understand what happened in this kind of settings. So the Frobenius algebra morphism is an isomorphism. Ah. Okay. Oof. Ah. So let F be a Frobenius algebra morphism, so be a morphism satisfying all the properties of definition 3.1. The following illustration, so we will show by picture that F is an isomorphism and its inverse is just its dual. The following illustration demonstrates that F star composed with F is the identity of X. And you will see, okay, so, okay. So what is F's dual composed with F? So you make F, okay, so F dual. Remember the definition of F dual. So F dual is nothing but something like that. And here you put F. Okay. So definition of F dual. Definition of F dual. So if you like, you can do that. And next, you will use the self-dual lemma. No, not this code. Here, so self-dual, to put the co-unit.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. So the co-unit, so you have F, like that. So you add the co-unit there. And then you use the algebra morphism axiom. Meaning that you can F split, so you can put F down. These two F can be put down into a single F. Algebra morphism. So what you get is you have a thing, so you put F down this way. Okay. And then what do we need? We will use the weak Frobenius. Remember what we call weak Frobenius. No. Here. So you can replace that by a co-multiplication symbol picture, and we'll use a co-unital morphism, so weak Frobenius. What we call weak Frobenius, which refer to some previous lemma. And let me use this color for co-unit morphism here. co-unital morphism, and you get equal to. So let me first replace. So you have this picture transform into this picture, and then you can put the F out, so you get that. And then you apply again the co-unit assumption, and you get that. So be careful, co-unit morphism and co-unit assumption is not the same. So, okay, you get that. Which is nothing but that by the fact that X is a Frobenius algebra. Okay. And so you started from X start F that. Similarly, we can show that F composed with F dual is the identity of X prime. So what I omitted to write, but this is identity of X. Okay, so F dual composed F is identity of X. So this is clear. Okay. And so the dual of F is really the inverse. So F is an isomorphism. Thus, the result follow. Okay. Okay, so let me write the sentence I say orally. Lemma 3.4 indicate that the concept of a Frobenius algebra morphism is too restrictive for defining the notion of a Frobenius algebra. Okay. And so next time, which will be after my parental leave, so I will be 2 weeks in parental leave because my wife is delivering a baby. So next time we will provide the definition of Frobenius algebra. So next time, so we will stop here. So next time we will provide the definition. So we will need to relax a little bit. Maybe what is the thing? If you want to spoil, the spoil is what? It's yeah, the unital. You keep unital, co-unital algebra, but you remove coalgebra. You keep monomorphism. So it's like a Frobenius algebra monomorphism in which you remove the algebra assumption. So in the four notion here, to get you need F to be a monomorphism, so left cancellative, but you omit this one. You only keep that with F left cancellative, and what you will get is really the notion of Frobenius subalgebra. Okay, so we will explain that next time. So I will stop here. So next class will be after my 2 weeks of parental leave. Parental leave. So should be, let me check. Let me check on my calendar. So that should be in April. Wait. April 8. No, April 9. April 9. Okay. Ah. Okay, so see you after 2 weeks. After 3 weeks, in fact. So next week.